Thank you all for tuning in. Today's show will be informative and educational. I initially discovered the word colorism in my early 20s. That was back in 2000. At the same time, I was sitting at the guidance counselor's office, and her words rang very loudly in my ear. And it took a couple of years, actually, for me to understand what she was saying. And her advice was, you will not have a hard time getting a job since you are light skinned. Have you ever wondered why we suffer colorism within the Black community? Let's go back to 1619 when the first slaves arrived on the shores of Jamestown, Virginia. There were two types of Blacks. There were, and I refuse to use the word on air. I had used it the last time, so I'm only going to say N. So they were the field N, and there were the house N. And the field N, what happened was they had the more laborious work. They worked in the field, and they always got served the last. The house N, and again, we're dating back to 1619. So this is generational. And then the house N had a little bit more education. The whites educated them, read to them, taught them how to read, and they had house duties. So when we go back and try to understand where it originated and how it affects us generation to generation, I think it's really important to understand that, and we were talking about it backstage. I'm going to let Carl speak about it in a minute, that it's a topic that we talk about at home. And the little words and the little things that occur in social settings or work settings actually impact us. Colorism is actually very, very rampant in India. Darker skinned women face discrimination at work, school, and in love. According to the World Health Organization, half of all skincare products in India are lighteners. The World Health Organization estimates it to be a $500 million industry in India alone. They use race cards, not race cards, shade cards, like paint swatches, so that the users can track the lightening of their skin. You might also be wondering what this has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. This impacts racism, classism, caste systems, and biases. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate. And for a living, I help thought-provoking leaders implement DEI workshop plans in their workplace. When you tune in, not only will you have better insight into our experiences, it will allow room for self-reflection. So how does colorism affect the Black community? Under the threat of persecution, Haitian-born Carl Juste and his politically active family were forced to flee their homeland in 1965, eventually settling in Miami's Haitian community. Since 1991, he has worked as an award-winning photojournalist for the Miami Herald. Juste has covered national and international stories for the Herald, including assignments in Haiti, Cuba, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. As part of his ongoing independent work in 1998, Juste co-founded Iris Photo Collective. In 2016, Carl won a prestigious Night Arts Challenge grant to complete Havana, Haiti, Two Cultures, One Community, a book, and exhibits of photographs and essays about Cubans and Haitians' lives and shared humanity. He opened IPC Art Space in 2019 to further the arts and won the Oolite, did I pronounce that right? Oolite Arts, the Ellie's in 2019. Carl, welcome.
Yes, I was on it this year too. So I'm a double winner. I say that because I'm very grateful to Ulight and to the Knight Foundation and the Green Foundation. They support a lot of the work that I'm doing that is based on creating a collective experience that's boundless regardless of origin of birth, faith, skin color, or of status of power. So I'm glad to be here, Rachel. I'm glad to be with Ray. Ray, it's great to meet you, my brother. And I'm looking forward to start this conversation.
Awesome. We'll introduce Ray as well, because I have a feeling this conversation is going to be hot. So, Ray Leonard Jr. needs a little introduction. He will forever be remembered appearing with his famous father, Hall of Fame boxer
Yeah.
Sugar Ray Leonard in the 1970s. Iconic 7 Up commercial capturing the hearts of millions. Ray Leonard Jr.'s father, one of the greatest boxers of all time, could not be prouder of his eldest son, his namesake. Ray Leonard Jr., now all grown up, is a former 2 sport division, 1 collegiate athlete, and former sports agent for some of the biggest names in sports credits. His father talks with him about opportunities. I've always remembered the words my father said. He would say, within our dreams, our aspirations, where we find our opportunities. Ray adds, I believe that all our dreams can come true if we dare to pursue them. He has dedicated his life to helping others through his commitment to being better every day. As an active supporter of many causes and a youth coach and mentor, Ray brings energy, excitement, and insight to any setting. Known always to light a room, light a room when he walks when he walks in. Pardon the pun, because we're going to be talking about that as well. Lights a room when he walks in. Ray is a top motivational keynote speaker, radio host, actor, and award-winning business executive. Launch Team Consulting Inc. focuses on diversity, leadership, and corporate culture training. He is also the author of Life Success Playbook, a dynamic book of heartfelt inspiration, life lessons, and practical strategies to drive change for young people. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. That's an amazing introduction. Couldn't have written it better myself, but appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation. But thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. The pleasure is all mine. So, when we think about colorism, we think about how it affects the Black community. And I'm going to leave it open. So, be comfortable, chime in whenever you feel that, you can have something to offer the audience. So, how does colorism affect the Black community?
Well, as for myself, professionally, as a photojournalist, there was very few Black people that in the newsrooms that I would visit or even on assignment. But socially, I was always a parent. Being the child of 6 and having siblings, the gradation of skin tone to those who I would be referred to as passers, to my beautiful chocolate skin. We as people of color always have to live with dualism. We're not afforded the luxury of having one world, right? We're constantly having to migrate in various different worlds, and 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 also changing our behavior so that we can be effective in our presentation, in our communication. So that being said, I remember living in New York and going to these great parties and to Haitian parties, and my father used to organize them or and support them, and you would see this sense of when I would come up to a light skinned Haitian, they will automatically start speaking French. And I noticed a pattern. When they would approach my dad, they would start speaking French. My father's very fluent in French and Spanish, so it was not a slight on him because he can navigate that space. But I always asked my dad, I said, why don't they come to you in Creole, you know? He goes, no, it's okay, you know. But when some of his darker friends would come over, the default was Creole, right? So I saw this dualism operating at a very early age. And I think colorism really plays on the duality, sometimes triple levels of existing as people of color.
Do you think that was a part, and we've done a show on this already before, do you think he was code switching?
Of course. Of course he was. Of course. I mean, you know, New York in 1965 was, you know, being Haitian there, it was difficult enough because you're an immigrant, number one. The Black community did not accept you. The white community saw you as whatever they deem to categorize you as. And so you're somewhat trying to navigate all these spaces which were not necessarily welcomed. And this is the sad part of colorism, because among Haitians, we should find sanctuary. And among our own people that we share culturally, sometimes religious connections and historical connections, I would assume that it would offer us a safe place. But many times during the course of my life, it was a reminder, because I'm darker, I was the lesser of. But my dad gave me one good memory. He said, son, your crown's been paid for, wear it well. And I move in that spirit. And I know sometimes, you know, you have to be I know sometimes you have to be an advocate of your own sense of identity, but that's a role that I, like your father, Ray Leonard Jr., and like yourself, you know, we have to be champions in our own space. Sorry, this is my dog. He's trying to kiss me. Get down. And that's a battle. It's not a burden. It's an exercise of our humanity, and that's an exercise I do every day.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, when I was growing up, you know, my parents were both teenagers when I was born, so I saw it, you know, colorism in the community, you know, at a young age, and most of it was in the social setting that back then. I did not really understand what it was, but you know, you heard the conversation of, oh yeah, he just likes the red bone light skinned girls, or the pretty light skinned guys, and I didn't understand why that was a thing that you had to actually address the color of the person, you know, to tell about, you know, how they looked. But you know, as I got older, I started to understand it was more of a thing of acceptance, within, you know, my area, my community, that people looked at lighter skin as being, as socially more acceptable than, you know, someone with darker skin. Because it always seemed to me like here it was shunned from a person with really dark skin, to, somebody with really light skin. It was kind of the thought process in the community that, you know, the light skins were what you wanted to achieve. You wanted to have the hair, you wanted to have the eyes to look, and there was a whole difference between that. You know, as I got older, got into business, went to school, you know, I got to see a totally different side of it too. Started to experience it some myself as well. But I think for the community, it's been inbred for so long, you know, to say that your skin color, or you, know, you being darker, was not uh, acceptable. Like when Michelle talked about the house in the in the field in, right? It's, you were less than because of your color, your skin color. You were more black, and so that made you less acceptable because you were more black. in the eyes of whoever else. So, I think that became a battle of our community, and still is, because when you're told that for so long, it's hard to break that cycle.
Right. It's interesting. Carl said something and it triggered so many memories that I had probably buried. And in high school, and it's exactly that, I was called a half breed or Oreo or zebra, all these names, and constantly bullied throughout all of high school, but within my community. So I was bullied and called those names within the Black community. And I got my hair chopped off because they didn't think my hair was real. I mean, it was very difficult. So not being accepted within the Black community, like you, Ray, you said only later on did you understand. So I didn't understand it at the time. And it was apparent that I also not going to be accepted by anybody else. For whatever reason, they didn't see me fitting in anywhere. So they didn't believe I was Haitian. They didn't believe I spoke French. They didn't believe I spoke in English. I wasn't Black enough. And so there was that dualism, Carl, that you were talking about. So when I went to university, again in Montreal, where I lived for 35 years. So again in Montreal, where I went to school in a very Concordia University. It was a very diverse school. So there was more of a more integration. There was a lot more diversity, more integration, and then the workspace started. So once I entered the workspace, then, like I'm sure you've probably both went through, there were a lot more questions. Well, you don't look Haitian. Well, you don't speak like a Black person. You're not one of us. And I think what happened during all of this, it was me processing the information. One, of course, it's hurtful, but what space is it coming from? Who is understanding that what they're saying is actually legitimate? And is it a way that they also are trying to assimilate the information? Do they know that Haiti is a colony? Do they know that, we were the first Black nation to be independent? Do they know of the different, people and races that live in Haiti? Was the education or historical facts imparted? So it was much deeper. When you go back to our history books, I wasn't taught about Black history at all in Montreal. It was not even in the history books. That's something that we had to learn ourselves, that my mom and my dad had to say, this is where we came from, and this is who we are, and this is who you stand for, and these are your descendants, because it's not taught in a school. So it's almost like it's an erasure. So now within the community, with the colorism, there is, like you said, there is this notion, just like the book, the lighter you are, the more opportunities that you will have in the workspace. So I think it's damaging because it doesn't unify us as a race.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up. You talk about in the workplace. You normally would think, in traditional corporate business, that's kind of where you would see this. But I saw it even, in the acting space, about what roles you could play, because of your skin color, or how you talk, or how you look. And sometimes it would be, directors or producers that are the same, it's the same, tone, but their thought process was, oh, you're too dark to be, playing an attorney. We don't. That's not the look that we're going for. But someone of a lighter skin could be the attorney. And even it's another brother. And so I started acting so young. It really didn't seek in. But when you start to see it and it comes back as you get older and you learn, the code switching, the changing of kind of the thought process, it's really disturbing. And I think not until I started hearing De La Soul and African Bambaataa, some of these rappers talking about loving yourself, loving your skin color, being proud of your heritage, that it started to make sense for me. And so I think that's part of the conversation that needs to continue to be had.
Yeah, I think both of you hit the point. I once read that racism is hard on the oppressor and the oppressed, because what it does, first of all, racism is lazy. Okay, it's lazy. All
What do
kinds
you,
of
what
racism
do you mean by lazy?
because it doesn't require you to engage. It doesn't require you. It allows you to make judgments and make evaluations based on tropes, based on stereotypes, and the way I was raised. Again, it goes to my personal experience, because when when my parents used to take me out in New York, maybe Rockefeller Center or to Bear Mountain, to Coney Island, you could count the amount of first of all, you count the amount of black people. When my parents went visited those spots, they didn't go there during Black History Month. They went anytime they wanted. And I once asked my dad, why all the time we go somewhere? Because my mother's very fair skinned, and my dad is a lighter shade of sugar, brown sugar. And I said, why every time we go somewhere, I'm the only person with this complexion? And he would look at me with a stern look, both my parents. It says, that is not a question for you to answer. That is an answer which comes to that space. And that stuck with me. And that has definitely fused into the work that I do when I photograph, when I'm in spaces, maybe Basel, maybe a war zone or a demonstration. I'm always looking for intersectionality, because we need to be the change that we desire, right? And I'm sure your dad, because of his athletic prowess, his intelligence, oh, he's a great boxer because he's black. Now, he's a great boxer because he worked. He worked and he sacrificed. He understood what was at risk. That every time he hit that ring, he was not fighting just for Sugar Ray. He was fighting for all the Sugar Rays who never made it. And I think that is what we lose when we fall into the trap of colorism. This collective, this legacy that we deny. And I think we can no longer afford to have that type of mindset, because we have too much to lose and so much to gain.
You brought up a great point, talking about that, because I look back at it, and early on, I was blessed to be able to have the greatest education to travel around the world and see different backgrounds and different people. And I thought that colorism was just inherent to the U.S., but it's everywhere. That was the disturbing part. You go over to the UK and you have some of the similar things. I went to Africa and saw it in Africa, and that's the one place I thought I would never see no colorism. Because our people would be confident of our people. But it's been inbred for so long, that kind of thought process that you're best than, or you're better than, or less than. So when we were growing up in the media, it was a standard thought process that we had to be a representation of our people, and the representation were that we were the clean cut Cosby family, that from a sports standpoint. So that was part of the the mix up in my head as well, is that, here's the expectation that you have to be this kind of person, and you have to talk a certain way, you have to look a certain way. So we were groomed to do that for a corporate standpoint because that's what was acceptable. And so now when you look back on it, and you see a lot more people are being more confident in being themselves. Now, I love this conversation. When I go through training about DE&I, a lot of the corporations have no idea. They just think, oh, all black is black. All this conversation is this. They have no idea of the differences and how many different cultures and races we have inside of our own culture.
Right. And do you think it stems from, I wrote a book on emotional intelligence, and I think what happens is in some of these spaces is that in order to know someone else, you need to know yourself, right? So we come back again, I'll thread from being confident. It comes from the confidence, but also it's that snap judgment we make from very, very young, right? And okay, someone appears with green hair, and then you make a snap judgment. And then that judgment stays with you and it becomes an unconscious bias. It's like, well, people with green hair are XYZ, according to that snap judgment that that person made. And it starts, and then you live by that bias, not realizing that you formed a bias. And then you bring it into your adult life. You bring it into childhood, and then you bring it into your adult life. And I think also it, in order for things to actually change, or for people, and we go back to the same thing, we're coming back to the same topic, is changing the mindset. Once someone changes their mindset and asks real legitimate questions and does their research on exactly what Ray was saying and what you were talking about, Carl, who are we? Where have we come from? What have we invented? Black and brown people have invented so much where the recognition has not come to light because, and I'll take it a step further, because they're still the oppressor. It's not coming to light because this is how we view Black and brown people of different shades. And unless they're seen as a basketball player, right? A Black person can't be anything else but a basketball player or a baseball player or a soccer player or someone who's entertaining. But where is it that they see us as scientists, as anthropologists? Is there a lack of media attention on that? Right? Is there a lack of media attention on the Black nurse, on the Black CEO, on the African president in Africa? Why and how do we, aside from being on this show, when does it go to the next level?
I think it goes with our children. My son, his mother is Estonian. Blue eyes, light brown skin, nice curly hair. And I remember since at birth, I would take him out with me, and I could see the perplexity in people's eyes because they wanted to touch him. They literally wanted to have him as if a possession, as if it was a doll. And I'm like, get your hands off my kid. I'm not watching him. That's my child. That's my birthright, right? So, and I think it really has to stem from relationships. And I asked the first relationship, in order to move past colorism and all the rest of the isms, is self-relationship. We have to stop waiting for a messiah. We need to be our own messiahs. I have this whole idea called self-salvation. And the act of self-salvation is a continuum. It's not an arrival. It is a continuous process, but you constantly, because we're changing all the time. I am not the man I was 2 years ago. Um, and I would hope 2 years from now, 2 months from now, I am not the same. My core principles might be the same, but the things that we all go through, the, the, the weight in the scroll of living in this thing called life, the weight and how we navigate those pressures, and also how we, not only how we fall, but how we fly. This is beautiful struggle that we're engaged in. And now you see, people saying, I want to give a shout out to, on TV, on newscasts, shout out to this person. And this code switching has now some found its way into the vernacular of those who are in power. In the sense of, I remember when LeBron was talking about specifically about the Black Lives Matter movement, a TV commentator on Fox said, "Hey, you need to shut up and just bounce the ball." I'm paraphrasing, that's not a direct quote. And I think, again, America can never be great and has not been great. It can't. How can you be great when you subjugate most of your population? It's a false claim. And so I'm saying to those who say, well, why it always have to be about race? I ask you one question. When's the last time someone of color sat at your table? When's the last time you went to a wedding of somebody of color? When did you buy a gift or a card outside of obligation for someone of color? I could tell you how many white people that are close in my life that I'm ride to die for, that I will be there for. I could tell you how many Hispanic or Latin brothers and sisters that I would ride and die for. You get invited to these parties and you walk in and, I call it the gravitational racial pull, right? There'll be another Black person across the room and y'all will kind of gravitate to each other. Say, what's up? What's up? We get that sign. We're walking down the street. I'm in Helsinki and I'll see a brother an African brother. I'll go like this and he'll do the same thing. When I see a dreadlock, he'll do the same thing. And this idea that you're not alone. Okay. And this idea you're not alone. So I think we need to get into the practice of self-salvation. And we need to claim our spaces, regardless of the circumstances that we may find ourselves.
Wow. You both brought up amazing points. You talked about the media and the continuation of the stereotypes through the media. I think that is a big issue, because if we're not having these conversations at home with our kids about, like Jay-Z said, you show up in a room and be comfortable as you are. You show up as you are, be comfortable in your own skin. And that's one of the things I tell my kids, because they're inundated continuously with these images of, this is what you should be. This is this is the only thing that you can be. This is where your space is, from, the TikTok to the news cycles that we see. And I think a lot of it is still deliberate, to keep, certain people in their places and say, here, you shouldn't aspire to be more than what we say you're going to be. And that continuously inundation of that conversation, it makes it tougher, and it makes it, continuously an issue of how we see ourselves when we go, even in our own races, to go, into any kind of situation, to have that conversation. So I think you brought up great points on both sides of that. And we got to teach it early, to be comfortable with who you are.
Right. It's on the past shows, we talk about creating a seat at your table or at any table, and bring your chair. Right. And, while we're on the topic of parenting, my daughter also is biracial, but she has Negroid features. And so how are others going to see her is what I tell her. And she went through a moment of going like this with her hair, because it's long and puffy and curly. And I didn't understand what she was doing. And then we went to a play. She was 3. So imagine how young it started. So she was 3. We went to a play, and there were I think it's called Cows That Type, and it was a Broadway, so and all the characters were they were dressed up as animals, and then she kept referring, with her little finger on her skin. And then I said, "Oh, that's the cow, and that's the puppy, and that's the dog." And then she's like, "Oh, I don't like the dog." And I said, "Why?" I said, "The dog is so beautiful." I said, "He's got a red costume and he's got big floppy ears." And she looked at me and she said, "Mommy." And I said, "Oh," I said, "you mean the makeup?" I honestly was oblivious to it. So I said, "Oh," I said, "you like his little makeup? He's got freckles, where the whiskers come out." And then the moment of truth. I was like, okay, I think this is what she's doing. So in my family, we come in various shades. So I showed her a picture. I had to do this. So I showed her a picture of my nephew, and who's dark but very handsome. And she said, "Mommy." And then I was like, okay, this is where it's going. So we had to take all the princess books out. I literally threw everything out. And I realized that what was being represented to her was not of her race. So now Princess in the Pea, Princess Tiana, all the characters that are in her books today, and she's 7 now, are Black characters, thought leaders of Black women who are astronauts. Florence Joyner, who was, I mean, this is history. This is part of our history. So when you say that it starts with our children, it absolutely does. Because if we didn't nip it in the bud, and like you said, your son, they were giving you strange looks. These are the conversations we have to have with our children so that they know who they are. Like I tell Sophia, you belong everywhere you go. I said, when people look at you, they will see you as a brown girl because your nose is broad, because your lips are full. And we make it a point of, this is who you are. It's okay to be in a space and be different. Different doesn't mean you're bad. Different doesn't mean you'll have less opportunities. It just means you're unique.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And also in our spaces that we have all shades of blackness on our walls. Kids have very, very keen eyes and keen ears. They're great listeners. They're
Right.
listening. You don't think they're not listening.
Right.
And they're watching. I mean, they'll hear what you say, but they'll pay more attention to what you do.
Right.
And the books that are on his shelves, I have books, about Malcolm X. I have books about Don Quixote. I mean, I have a variety of different experiences because I think I'm a better person when I can engage with people from different vantage points, right? Um, but I'm Black,
Hmm.
and I'm unapologetically Black. The work I do for the Herald is about diversity, but it's also about that diversity within our Blackness.
Right.
We did this last February. We did 28 prominent people of color of African descent, and we featured one a day for 28 days.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and then there were doctors, lawyers, there were civil rights activists. I mean, they ran the gamut. And my point was history is not past, it's constantly present. And we know that more than anyone else on this planet,
Right.
that history is not behind us. It's it's in front of us also, but it's in the spaces that we occupy. And to confront that history with a sense of courage and with a sense of delightfulness When I say black, I don't just think of slavery. That's a small part of the of my experience. I mean, we're pharaohs, we're kings, we're travelers. I mean, we're many things. Alexandria in Egypt had the baddest library in the world at the time, and those who were in power were so jealous that they burned it down. So we need to stop being jealous of each other because of colorism, because we burn each other down. Let's lift ourselves up. Let's be to quote Bette Midler, let's be the wing beneath our wings. Let's lift each other because what Tali Kweli says. He quotes this proverb: if you could talk, you could sing. If you could walk, you can dance.
Mm.
I live by that every day.
Mm.
And sometimes I stumble, sometimes I fall. 7 drops, 8 lifts, right? We get back up. And people understand that's something they admire, but it would have to reconcile the way they treat us. And I think, that is what is a hindrance for people who don't look like us or don't understand the importance of our collective experiences. That they love all these things, but in order to embrace what you love, you have to reconcile the stuff that you've done. I mean, when one of the hardest thing for me to do, and thank God I never had to do corporal punishment for my son. Now I never would touch my son, because I was raised in a household that was a little bit more different. I was raised in a tough household, but I understood when my dad went to a beat down every day. Every day he was getting beaten down, and he would get right back up.
Figuratively.
Figuratively,
Yeah.
yeah. And he'll come home, and and things would trigger him, but my mom would tell him to pause and to breathe, and to understand you can't bring that into our sanctuary. We
Mm.
have to we have to produce spaces. That's not our personal houses. That's not our cars. That's not our offices. But it's anywhere your foot roams. You got to find your sanctuary. If you're in Helsinki or if you're in Haiti, if you're in Cuba or if you're in Cameroon, it doesn't matter. You have to find your sanctuary. And that's what I was saying about that requires work. And
Mm.
that also requires trust. So we have
Trust
to,
in yourself.
of course,
Mm.
of course, because leaders lead. They just lead. There's nobody in front of the leader.
Hmm.
I told my son, you have 2 choices: shepherd or sheep. But you know what? The leopard's trying to eat both of them. So, so this is your choice. And I said, every time he gets in the car, what are you today? Shepherd. I said, all right, good. Every time.
Yep. Ray, you said you have 4 kids. Or did you say that? I read that in your
Yeah,
bio.
yeah, no,
Yeah, I read that in your bio. And
yeah,
what
I
is
have,
it for you? Yeah, tell me.
yeah, I have 4 kids. 2 girls and 2 boys. The boys are in the middle, and my oldest daughter, she's 11 years older than my her closest son, well, my son, and it's been a conversation with them, since they were young, about empowerment for me, because my grandfather told me something when I was young that he told me, when you know better, you do better. And so that's always been a persistent thing in my life, is to learn from every single situation, never to take a downfall or bad situation as something more than a time to learn from a lesson and figure it out how to be better from it. And so we look at it, and they see their grandfather won all these world championships and gold medals, and had this kind of thought process that they had to be that. And I said, no, you are fine exactly how you are. We all have our own path. You have your own DNA. You have your own, fingerprint for a reason. And so be comfortable with who you are. And my daughter ended up getting an academic scholarship into Pepperdine University, and graduated, at the top of her class. And the funny thing about it is, I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. And so the cycle has been changed, and it's continuing to say, here, we are redefining who we are. And we're okay with how we are. My son just went to, as a freshman at Grambling State University. So he's getting a different experience from HBCU. So, and, from the community that we live in now, and him going to see a whole different experience, he said this was something that he needed, because he was kind of sheltered. Even though we have these conversations, you don't really know until you actually are there and amongst your people and see he's getting colorism from a high level standpoint right now. And, he had never really had to deal with it, but he's dealing with it now.
Does he realize? So he's away for college at the HBCU, right? And you see him as facing this now. Does he understand what he's facing?
Yeah, I mean, um, in California, it's different than in the South. So Southern Louisiana is where he is, and so there's a little bit of different conversations that are being had there, and I think it's it's more kind of in the face for him.
It's
It's
overt.
always been there, but it's more in the face for him. And so he is navigating his way through it because, I told him, like, I can't do this for you. I can't, learn this lesson for you. This is something that you have to see and be able to be confident in, to be able to have these conversations within your groups. And so that's how you progress when you're having those conversations within your groups. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to have these tough conversations. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that's actually, I think we're making some kind of progress, is that we're having these conversations. We're starting to see it's okay to be, a doctor. It's okay to be different, but still be part of your own culture. Yeah. So, and I think that's one of the big things that we're learning as we go.
I think punishment is delivered and distributed differently too. I think let me give you a case in point. You know, white folks go to rehab, black folks go to jail. And the way we punish ourselves in terms of colorism has a similar pathway. We hard on dark people. We hard on them, and I guess it's a knee jerk reaction because we in colorism there is a another level of segregation.
Mm.
There's another level of other,
Hmm.
even though they're part of the same subset, right? So how we punish ourselves and how society punishes us. Bill Cosby, he eventually was let out of jail, and how we feel his guilty of innocence. He was what they call American's father, right? And soon as he fell out of grace, sooner his purpose was no longer. And don't forget, his rise was during this whole movement of diversity in all aspects, in newsrooms, in the job, in education, in 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 various aspects of life. And now, all of a sudden, that we don't have the option to fail. And I think
Mm.
that's the most hardest thing, because then when a child or a person feels like he cannot afford to fail, he might think the next step, I can afford to try.
Mm.
And this deferred sense of success is almost as damaging as a deferred dream.
Hmm.
So I say to all of those who are listening, is that we have work to do. Our salvation must start with us. Not the whole song, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with you." I mean, that to me is very profound. We need to find our peace, but that peace has to come by on our terms. If I want to wear baggy pants and sweatshirt, I mean, I wouldn't walk into the newsroom that way, because my role in that newsroom is different. But suppose I was at work, and I say, let me go back, and I just came from playing basketball. Let me go to the job and pick up something. I had to think twice. Whereas my colleagues of other persuasions had the luxury, no one is going to judge him solely on how he looks or she looks. And again, there's no burden bear, but there's sacrifice that need to be made. Those I'm not one. I understand that in this foot race, I am pulling 50 pounds, but I also have maybe 5 or 6 people ahead of me pulling me forward. So collectively, we carry a weight, but collectively, we can have flight. And this is what I'm more moving forward in my work. This is what I'm trying to explore. This idea of the Black struggle in the context of Black joy.
You mentioned that we came to your event.
Yeah,
You talked about Black joy.
it's beautiful because that's all I ever knew. Yeah, people were getting arrested. My brothers and were getting harassed by cops. There were gang fights. They got involved in Brooklyn. And my brother used to work for Carbine, was passed up. Though he was much more talented, was passed up for promotion. He finally got it. And you know, we don't. Unfortunately, we don't have the option to sit down and write down all the wrong things that are happening to us because we need to spring into action. And there's going to be a day that's going to change. But I say that day is now. It starts with your behavior. Don't wait for your Messiah. You are your Messiah. Okay? And if we can see each other as each other's saviors, as truly as sisters and brothers keepers, then all these other isms will not have the gravity or the pull that they have now.
Or the impact,
Or the
right?
impact, correct.
Right.
It's beautiful, especially you talking about joy. That's not a conversation that we have. Like, where are we supposed to be happy? Can we be happy? Can we enjoy the moments that we have? I think that's a very important thing that the conversation needs to change on that. One of the other things I talk about too is have you ever had someone say, I don't see color.
Mm, Don't even get me started.
Yeah, I'm gonna need that conversation to change. And so
Yeah.
here, I need you to see my color and understand that I'm good enough and I'm acceptable, or I'm confident and competent, and I can do my job, or I can do whatever it is needs to be that I was blessed to do without you having to have these preconceived notions of it. So that's where joy is going to come in when more people are accepting of themselves and the differences of each other.
Right. I mean, you hit it right on the nail. This idea that, again, being the charge that comes before you
Mm,
and living on this planet, we always seem to be in court. You know, you know,
mm,
we always are defendants, never plaintiffs.
mm,
Okay, so this charge that comes, this scroll of charges, I will, I will take on.
mhm.
And I will make my innocence will not be proven by your laws, but by the laws of God or whatever belief system that I hold. I had the pleasure of meeting Muhammad Ali, and I had the pleasure of spending time with the Dalai Lama and people of exceptional strength. They also are people of have exceptional sense of peace. Now, to arrive at that peace, they had to fight, right? Bob says, and you know, when the color of your skin is no longer of significance, we'll be good. But until then, there'll be war. There will be war. But we have to stop fighting with ourselves and use each other as allies and say, okay, who has my back?
Hmm.
And I
Who's in
thought,
alignment with me?
yeah, who's in alignment with me? And my ally may not even look like me.
Right.
Because I have plenty of allies who are of not even black. They're not straight. They run the gamut. And the idea of diversity in its true sense is not only that we're different, but our difference are important. It's
And
not a
that we,
sideshow.
right. And that we bring different experiences,
Right,
right?
right, right, right. And I see it in my sons. I pick him up from school every day for 3 o'clock, and I see when I pick him up, children or other children his age and older are around him. But I see the way he treats the younger kids. They look up to him, and he sticks up for them. He doesn't let nobody bully anybody in his presence. And he gets mad. He's a lot like me. He gets mad, he gets emotional, and sometimes I go out and talk, and I got to keep a tissue by the lector because I'm talking about things that are so personal.
Mm.
And I have no problem shedding tears. They're not tears of pain; they're tears of triumph. So I will shed as much tears as possible as long as I know I will succeed. If those tears are part of my ability to navigate from a space of isolation of other to a space of inclusion, I am going to cry to the day I die. And we have to teach our kids that feeling compassionate, having compassion is the first step in having intelligence. Because in order to 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 acknowledge, you have to come to terms with your own fears. And I'm unapologetic about that. I am a sinner. I, as much good things I've done, I'm sure there's plenty of people who think I'm a jerk, and I'll take that punishment because I know who I really am. I'm a good person, and I have value, and I sometimes fall. But when I come up, I never bring myself up alone.
Mm. I need a minute. I need a minute.
Take all the time you need.
But it's so well put, and I think it hits home when you talk about your own household, and you talk about your kids,
Yeah,
and you talk about the kind of world that we want to leave them,
yeah,
and what we want them to live in. One
yeah.
of the core values of my company is that we want to have diversity of mind, skill, and thought,
Mhm.
because it makes us better. And when you talk about that kind of hit home to me too. That I teach the same thing to my kids. No matter who you're surrounded by, what people our diversity makes us better. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't be the same kind of robots. We can't be the same people. That dulls the life experience. And so, sooner that we're able to accept it and enjoy it,
Mhm.
and enjoy the differences and learn from it, and know that it makes us stronger and better, the better off we'll be. And so that's kind of what I want to leave to my kids, in a world where they're accepted for who they are, and they accept others for who they are, and they do unto others as they would have them do unto them.
Yeah. Well, Rochelle has started this universe of understanding and love and compassion and knowledge. And there are plenty of universes beyond, or plenty different galaxies in the continuum universe. And operating in our own galaxies where we can find, where we orbit around love, where we orbit around understanding and compassion.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that you have to like me, but you damn well will respect me. You will damn. I'm not looking for friends. I've made enough friends. I will always take more friends, but the friends that I have are good enough. I will be respected because I walk like a champion. I talk like a champion. And I've been fortunate enough to have taken the proper roads, being put in a crossroad, that I chose right, but choosing right was measured in degrees.
Mm.
It wasn't a tight wasn't a quick turn to the left. It was a slight turn to the left.
Mm.
And one of the things I always would tell myself, I said, what would I have done to my parents who have sacrificed so much? I end up in jail. If I end up in jail because a cop was harassing me and I was doing my job, my dad and my mom would be right there in that cage with me.
Oh, yes.
And it'll be an honor. And it's always been, I think that's why I became a journalist, because I knew the importance of the work that I do. Whatever I do has to multiply. Just as you, Ray, and just as you, Michelle, every step you make reverberates into this universe of equity, and it multiplies. So if we need to cry, if we need to laugh, if we need to dance, if we need to sing, if we need to run, if we need to stop, just do it.
Mm.
But don't let the world tell you what you need to do.
Mm.
Well, I'm off my soapbox.
I'd say that's a mic drop moment right there.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, very, and I say this with heavy of hearts. I'm honored because I could feel the weight that I think I've been carrying. I knew all along that I was not carrying it alone.
Mm.
And I
You need to stop.
I thank you, Ray. I thank you, Rochelle. And I personally thank both of y'all. And know that this is just a beginning of multiple conversations. And know that you have a brother and sister. Well, I know I have a brother and sister that you can always count on me. Just by doing this, now gave you license to reach out to me in any capacity that you feel that you need.
Mm.
Okay.
Love it. Appreciate you both. We all in this fight together. So I mean,
Absolutely.
we have this conversation so we understand it.
Absolutely. And as we bring these courageous conversations out onto the open space and a safe space, I think we're doing a service to all. So my keynote is that while I tried to limit my own bias as much as possible through the tears by interviewing only men and women I did not know and sticking to the same set of questions for ongoing interviews, it was impossible for me to remove my own personal experience from this discussion altogether. Without it, I would have not been able to undertake it in the first place. The continual theme surfaced that if true equality in and out of the workplace is what we are after, we will have to tackle the issues that are distinctive to us.
Yes.
We need to recognize we're not alone. I know that many of you are having these transparent conversations and dialogues with people around you who are trying to figure out how you feel about all of this. It would help if you pondered that change starts with us.
Yes.
How you resolve these questions will be distinctive to you as men and women of color and of diverse backgrounds. This will reflect your personal and professional experiences through your community and your workspace. What's essential is that you answer these questions. What's crucial is that you go through that process. And while enough of us can do just that, over time, we will continue having a united front.
Right.
That is what we're after. Transparency and authenticity is key. We need to be true to ourselves. We can fundamentally create that transformation. Take your drawbacks and turn them into something others find valuable, and give yourselves some grace. Gentlemen, it's been my pleasure to have both of you. It was such an honor to have both of you on the show. Thank you so much. This has been another epic moment, and there are more to come.
Thank you so much, Rochelle, and pleasure meeting you, Ray. You carry your surname very well. just by our conversation. And I wish all of y'all move in peace. I really do. And I mean that. Move in all sense of the word of peace.
Mm.
Oh, love it. Thank you both so much. It was a great time to be on here, and anytime we're having a conversation about moving forward, it's positive, lit my day up. So thank you both, and keep doing what you're doing, because we're making a difference.
Thank you. And I wish you the same.